Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Mark Whitman didn't like to rush. He knew that in Riverford, a small town on the outskirts of Montana, everything flows according to some special, slow law of time. Perhaps the culprit was the surrounding mountains, where the wind whistles so loudly that it seems to be able to blow all worries out of your head. Mark loved to look for a long time at these mountain ranges, often shrouded in fog, and think about his future home. That day, he was working on renovating an old barn that belonged to the Hartford family. The barn stood on the outskirts of a farm, which at one time was famous for raising livestock and grain fields. Now the fields were overgrown with weeds, and the barn itself was in urgent need of restoration so that the roof did not completely collapse. Mark, Joe Hartford, an elderly farmer with a penchant for grumbling, shouted from the ground, "Be careful on that ridge. If you fall down, your wife will eat me alive." "It's all right, Mr. Hartford," Mark responded, standing on a stepladder and holding a sheet of roofing metal with his hand. "I've been repairing roofs for several years now. I'll manage somehow." The gray sheet weighed noticeably, but Mark was used to physical labor. At 39, he maintained his strength and stamina through constant part-time work. He renovated houses, fixed cars, and could replace a door or a water pipe. All of Riverford knew him as that same Whitman who has golden hands. Joe grunted and went, limping, to the water to fill a bucket from the pump. The farmer did not like to argue, although he usually grumbled like a grumpy grandfather. Mark put on his work gloves, pulled the next piece of roofing to the right place, and began to carefully fasten the sheet with self-tapping screws to the wooden rafters. The work proceeded slowly. The wind blew through, tore a couple of small nails from the windowsill, threw them straight into the grass, making Mark frown. But he continued, step by step, sheet by sheet, to restore the roof. Over many years of work, Mark learned to appreciate and respect matter: wood, metal, glass. In his opinion, each material had character. You need to be able to find an approach to it. This is how he treated people, but people, alas, were sometimes not so reliable. At lunchtime, the farm wife, Bernice Hartford, brought out lunch: a couple of ham sandwiches, a thermos of coffee, and an apple. Mark came down the stairs and thanked her with a calm nod. He looked a little tired, but outwardly he remained calm and even friendly. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartford," he said, accepting the thermos. She smiled. "I know that you usually bring your own lunch, but since you've been with us all day, I thought you could use some hot coffee. I hope everything is fine in your life." She asked this with participation, although in a typical provincial manner. "They say, I still know how you are doing, but let me at least formally ask." "Yes, everything is fine." "I'm working," he answered briefly, trying to make his voice sound cheerful. He's not used to complaining. Even when something went wrong, Mark would hardly start crying for his life. From the time he was a little boy, his father taught him perseverance and the ability to solve problems on his own. At the mention of his father, memories flashed through his head. A lake, a little way from Riverford, where they once fished together. Since then, Mark has cherished a dream to buy a plot of land on the shore of this lake and build a house there. Your own log, warm house with a fireplace and a wide terrace, where in the mornings you can see the fog over the water, and in the evenings you can hear the fish splashing near the shore. He saved money quietly, methodically, telling almost no one about his goal. Everyone around him thought that he was just a guy who likes to earn extra money, and Mark simply did not want his dreams to be ridiculed or devalued. Sitting on a log next to the barn and biting into a sandwich, he briefly remembered Christine. How is she, I wonder now? Probably at work at a pharmacy in downtown Riverford. She is usually unhappy when he takes on additional orders. She says that he is already too rarely at home. Although in the last year there have been increasingly tense moments between them. Boring routine life, penny earnings, Everyone gives up on us. These reproaches of hers sounded louder and louder, and Mark did not know how to object to her. He didn't consider his life boring. He worked with his hands and saw the result of his labor. What's wrong with that? He chuckled at his thoughts, finished his coffee, threw the empty bag into the toolbox, and stood up. Thank you for the food, Mrs. Hartford. I'll go back to the roof. There's not much left. Okay, Mark, she smiled. And don't forget, they promise stronger winds in the evening. Maybe you'd better finish tomorrow. I'll look at the circumstances, he nodded. Having finished the conversation, he got down to business. When the wind got stronger, he realized that he would still have to leave some of the work for later. Fastening sheets of metal under the gusts of heavy winds was risky. At exactly 4 in the afternoon, he gathered his tools and went to his old Ford F-150 pickup, which was barely holding up thanks to his constant maintenance and repairs. Take care of yourself, Mark, Joe Hartford shouted after him. Thank you, Mr. Hartford. See you tomorrow. Mark waved goodbye and got behind the wheel. The car snorted and did not start right away, but listening to the driver's confident hand, it finally picked up the speed. Mark drove out of the farm onto the dirt road leading to the highway. Ahead of him lay the evening and a conversation with Christine. He felt that all was not well in their home. But I hoped that this was a temporary, windy peak, a whirlwind of feelings and discontent that would sooner or later subside. Already at dusk, Mark drove up to the modest one-story house where he and Christine lived. They rented this house at a very cheap price from an elderly relative. Mark entered the living room through a small veranda, where there were a couple of old chairs and a stack of magazines that Christine liked to leaf through in the evenings. She greeted him silently, glancing briefly from the kitchen. There was a smell of something burnt. Apparently, she was trying to cook something new. Hey, Chris, Mark said, taking off his jacket and hanging it on the hanger. How was your day? She pulled the baking sheet out of the oven and angrily slammed it on the stove. Damn, everything's burnt again. I knew I shouldn't buy that frozen pizza. Everything in their instructions is written nonsense. Or is our oven acting up? I can look at the oven tomorrow, Mark suggested. Maybe our thermostat is down. Yes, you can. Her voice sounded irritated and her eyes tired. Okay, I'll try to pick something off. Maybe we'll find something edible, or I'll just heat up yesterday's soup. Mark wanted to say that he would happily eat burnt pizza if only she would calm down, but he remained silent. He walked into the living room and looked around at the modest furnishings. An old sofa, a coffee table that had seen better days, a TV that sometimes played local channels. While he was washing his hands, Christine brought a plate with burnt edges of pizza and a couple of forks into the living room. Sorry about that, she said. The store said it was a good brand, but it seems they deceived me. It's okay. I'm hungry, so I'll be happy about that, he said, trying to smile. I had a difficult day. This roof is in Hartford again. Yes, there is a lot of work there. I'll finish it tomorrow. He will pay me well, and this will help us. Christine raised an eyebrow. Will it help with what? For more instruments. Actually, to pay bills and buy groceries, he answered carefully. We live on my regular part-time jobs. You know the pharmacy had reduced hours this month, and you're not on a full schedule. She sighed, staring at her plate. Mark saw that she didn't want to listen to these reasonable arguments now. She's tired, annoyed, or maybe she's again remembering that her best years are wasted away in routine. Are you saying that it's my fault? She asked unexpectedly. It wasn't me who decided how many shifts I should be put on. I would generally get the hell out of here, to another city. Maybe there would be more opportunities there. We've already discussed this, Mark sighed. Moving to the city costs money, and we don't have much of it. And I don't want to give up our plot by the lake. You know, this is our dream, Chris. She abruptly pushed the plate away. This is your dream, Mark. Yours, not mine. He paused for a moment. The sound of her plate hitting the table sounded harsh. I thought we wanted to move together closer to the lake. We'll build a house there, start a family, children. Family, children, she repeated dully. So what? Living in a house by the lake is like in an old movie. And every day, what will we do in this house? Looking at the water. You can fish, pick mushrooms, grow a garden. You have always loved nature. Christine laughed briefly, but there were bitter notes in her laughter. Yes, I loved when I was 20. Now I want a normal life. Mark, I look at my friend Becky. She has everything organized. A big house in Bozeman, a husband with money, restaurants, shops. What about us? We have nothing except your barn and this shack. Don't call our house a shack, he asked quietly. She leaned back on the sofa and closed her eyes. Sorry, I'm just tired. Don't know. It seems to me that we are standing still and will always be so. Mark didn't know what to answer. He really was a stable man. He did not strive for luxury, but Christine seemed to want something different more. And the awareness of this gap between them cut my heart deeper and deeper. He just sighed and said, "Let's try to finish dinner, and then I'll go online and look for jobs in Riverford that might interest you. Maybe some new place will be found." But she was already silent, looking down at the charred edges of the dough. Perhaps, deep down, she was ashamed of her rude tone, or perhaps she simply did not see the point in talking any more about what had long ago become a bottomless abyss between them. The next day came. Christine's mornings were always spent at the pharmacy. Customers came with prescriptions, complained about their health, complained about prices, some complained about problems in the family. Working in a pharmacy required politeness and the ability to listen. Christine did it automatically. She smiled, followed each customer with her gaze, but thought about her own things. Her friend and colleague, Cindy, noticed her frown. "Chris, what happened? You don't look like yourself. Today, the third person said that it's like you're not with us." "Yes, so," Christine answered evasively, hiding the money in the cash register. "Problems at home. It seems like yesterday they said that everything is as before." "It's the old way," she sighed. "This is the problem. You see, I feel like I'm stuck. That I'm already 36 and I haven't achieved anything. I live in the outback, work in a small pharmacy, always counting money until my next payday." Cindy shook her head sympathetically. "Yes, I understand. But we are in Riverford. There are no other opportunities here. It is unlikely that a corporation will suddenly appear here and take us as managers. Have you thought about moving?" Christine shrugged. "Yes, I thought. But Mark doesn't care. It ends up in this unfortunate area by the lake. I already hate this place, even though I've only seen it a couple of times. Understand that he is seriously planning to build a house there. Can you imagine myself from a log, like an old man from some 19th century? Well, what if it turns out beautiful?" Cindy said this more out of friendly solidarity, although she was not sure. Christine just smiled bitterly. "Yeah, and we will live like in a fairy tale. Heat the stove with wood. Brilliant. And I would like a normal toilet and a bathroom with a jacuzzi, and to have somewhere to go to unwind. Becky has so many options in Bozeman, clubs, restaurants, boutiques." And she also complained, "Remember when we were in college, that it's better to live in a small, cozy city?" "People change," Cindy nodded. "Have you ever gone to visit her?" "No, but she already offered. I'll still take a day off and go crazy. I want to see everything with my own eyes. Maybe at least a little sip of life. Don't be afraid to offend Mark. He won't even notice if I leave for a day." There was bitterness in Christine's voice. "He is busy with his part-time work. Don't get me wrong, Cindy. I don't want to leave my husband just like that. But it seems to me that we are going in different directions." Another customer approached, an elderly woman with a prescription. Christine put on a professional smile and nodded. And so the whole day a wave of gray routine, as she called what was happening. The hours dragged on. By lunchtime, Christine didn't even feel like eating. Scraps of thoughts were spinning in their heads. To leave, to stay, to find a job in another city, whether they would have enough money, what all this would lead to. In the evening, Kristen went to Becky to at least chat with her on the phone and find out about the possibility of coming to Bozeman. Becky, her longtime friend, moved there after marrying a businessman and, judging by social media, was living large. They had a spacious house in a decent area, and Becky herself wore expensive clothes and posted photographs from trips abroad. This inspired Christine, but at the same time it subconsciously caused an even greater longing for a better world. When Becky's cheerful voice came on the other end of the line, Christine smiled. Beck, hi, how are you? Hello, friend, I'm great. I went to the spa here, then dropped into the shopping center and bought myself a couple of dresses. You should have seen my husband's face when he saw the check. Becky laughed cheerfully. But I rarely spoil myself, right? Christine, clutching the phone, laughed quietly. Well, for you, maybe it's rare. But the last time I bought a dress, hell, I don't even remember when. Probably for our anniversary with Mark. And it was on sale. Chris, stop. You need to take care of yourself. You have a great figure. By the way, I wanted to invite you to our place for my birthday. It's in a week. We'll have a small bachelorette party, then my husband will give us something, maybe take us to a restaurant. Is it true? I wish I could. Only. Christine thought for a moment. What will I tell Mark? Will he object? But she said out loud, I'll probably come. I already want to change the situation. Everything is so monotonous here. Great. Waiting for you. Tell your husband that you are staying with me for a couple of days. I have a large guest bedroom. Make yourself comfortable. Let's enjoy life. Kristen's insides burst with anticipation. Here it is, a chance to escape at least a little from the swamp. She began to say goodbye to Becky, promising to write the exact dates of her arrival. Having completed the call, Christine went outside. The day was nearing sunset, but it was still quite light, and local residents were leisurely wandering along the main street. Small town, gray everyday life, familiar faces, empty central square. Am I sure I want to spend my whole life here? Christine asked herself, and she answered, no. Her dissatisfaction was ripe and required an outlet. That's why she took Becky's offer as a lifeline. She looked up at the sky, where the sun had disappeared behind the mountains, and thought about how she would soon see the bustling streets of Bozeman, the many shops and restaurants. Isn't this what she wanted for a long time? When she returned, she found Mark preparing dinner. He mixed some vegetables in a frying pan and tasted them from time to time. Hearing footsteps, he turned around. Hello, how's your day? She shrugged. Fine. Can I help you? No, I can handle it. I decided that today I will cook it myself so that you can rest. Thank you, she said without much enthusiasm, and sat down tiredly at the table. Listen, Mark, I need to leave for a couple of days next week. It's Becky's birthday, and she invited me to Bozeman. Do you mind? He stopped stirring the vegetables and frowned. To Bozeman? Well, I don't mind, of course. It's just... Do you really need it for a couple of days? Maybe you can go for a day. Becky invites you for an overnight stay, and there is no point in trudging back and forth in one day. I understand, he sighed, returning to the frying pan. Okay, if you need it. But Chris, be careful on the road. I'm aware, Mark, she answered tiredly. If anything, Becky's husband has a driver. Maybe they can pick me up from the city. Don't worry. He continued to cook in silence, trying not to show his anxiety. Mark suspected that a trip to Bozeman might worsen their already fragile understanding. After all, it is there that Christine sees that very real life that she so misses, but he did not dare to prohibit. She has the right to choose where to go. He's not a despot. For dinner, they ate vegetable stew, almost without words, as if they both understood that the conversation would lead nowhere anyway. Mark asked about work. Christine answered in monosyllables. She asked if any of the clients had called Mark. He replied that he would finish at the Hartfords tomorrow and then maybe take a couple of days off to do his own thing. She knew that by his own business, he meant the area by the lake, where he had long wanted to go to check if everything was in order. And it was precisely this area that she thought about with cold irritation, looking at her husband across the table. But she said nothing. Discontent was brewing on both sides, but so far remained unresolved. like an unrepaired part in a mechanism that creaks, but no one undertakes to lubricate it. And every night this creak became louder. Several days passed, and Mark found time to escape to his treasured lake. He got into the pickup truck, put a bag of tools, a thermos of coffee, and sandwiches in the trunk. There was no rush. Christine had already left for Bozeman for Becky's birthday. He felt a quiet relief. They were separated, but at least for a while there would be no conflicts between them. The road to the lake went through a hilly area surrounded by pine and spruce trees. Chipmunks ran out every now and then, and eagles circled in the sky. Mark slowly turned the steering wheel and thought, when will he finally have enough money to purchase the rest of the plot and begin construction? He had already taken out one half of the land on credit and was going to buy the second from the widow of the old owner. She gave him installments, but still needed a large sum. Mark recalled how, as a child, his father took him fishing to the same lake. They lived poorly then, but the father always found time for his son. They sat on a small old pier, peering into the calm surface of the water. There, on the sun-drenched shores, Mark for the first time felt drawn to simple work and nature. After all, life is so short, and you want to live it with a feeling of connection with the earth, water, and forest. Finally, he reached his station. The car rolled carefully along a narrow dirt road, through thickets of bushes. Opening the door, he breathed in the fresh forest air. The mountains stretched out on the horizon, the needle-like tops of the forest receding into the distance. And the lake. How beautiful it was even on a cloudy day. The dark blue of the water rippled slightly in the wind, reflecting the uneven clouds. Mark walked to the edge of the shore and squinted slightly. Here, he thought, will be my home. I imagine a log cabin, porch overlooking the water, large windows. There is a fireplace in the room. Maybe we can add a veranda. The picture stood before his eyes so clearly, as if he had already built the walls and was watching the sun set behind the mountains. He felt uplifted like never before. He walked along the shoreline, wondering where to lay the foundation. Then I rose a little higher, to a hill. The soil turned out to be quite suitable. The ground was strong. He took out a notebook from his pocket, where he made sketches and notes. You will need to lay the water supply from a well. Plant a couple of pine trees at the entrance. You need to check access to electricity or install a generator and then solar panels. All these plans filled him with inspiration, which he had so lacked in recent weeks, filled with a quarrel and tension with Christine. He imagined how they could live here, quiet mornings, fishing on weekends, picnics on the green grass. But then the image of his wife, her cold gaze, popped into his head, and Mark felt a contradiction. She never shared this dream, as if she and I were two different planets. And then his soul became a little heavier. He continued to look around the area, trying not to succumb to sadness. It was the first time in her life that Christine found herself in such a big house. Becky and her husband, Greg, lived on 2 floors with a wide entrance hall, a dark wood staircase, and windows overlooking a neatly manicured lawn. They had a swimming pool in their backyard. When Christine walked inside, she felt like she was in a movie where everything looked rich and inaccessible. "Chris, come in." Becky hugged her happily. "I'm so glad you were able to get out." "Well, how do you like our possessions?" "Wow. Becky, this is gorgeous. I've never seen anything like this in person," admitted Christine. "Everything here is like in a magazine." "Greg knows how to make money," the friend smiled. "Yes, and I work in his company in an administrative position." "Well, let me introduce you to someone." The spacious living room was crowded with several guests, Becky's friends, a couple of her husband's relatives. There was light background music, glasses of champagne, and welcoming smiles. Christine's attention was immediately attracted by a man of about 40, tall, with a confident look and a toned figure. He approached Becky from behind and put his arm around Becky's shoulders. "Hey, hostess, did you remember to introduce me to the new guest?" Becky burst out laughing. "This is Dylan Morrison, the owner of a construction company. A very successful guy in our area. Dylan, this is Christine Whitman, my friend from Riverford." "It's a pleasure," Dylan said. taking Christine's hand and squeezing it slightly in a warm handshake. From Riverford? Interestingly, I have a couple of clients there too. Yes, I'm from there, Christine answered, feeling her heart beating a little faster. Dylan's manner conveyed a calm superiority. Nice to meet you. He smiled slightly, looking at her appraisingly. From Riverford. So you should know how many opportunities are hidden in our area. I get the best shots from there. Well, sit down, let's talk. Christine nodded, confused but also intrigued. If you compare Dylan with Mark, the difference is striking. This man radiated strength, confidence, without doubting anything. He talked about his construction projects and mentioned that big money is always in real estate. And Christine listened and felt how much she liked it. In his mouth, life seemed bright, full of chances and achievements. They talked almost the entire evening. Sometimes someone would come up and interject, but Dylan was clearly paying special attention to it. Compliments were heard. You are so smart. You exude special strength. I wish I had such managers in my company. Christine literally blossomed from these words because no one in Riverford praised her so much. There she was, the wife of Mark the mechanic, but here she was treated as a full-fledged interlocutor. As the evening drew to a close, Becky winked at her friend with a conspiratorial smile. Dylan, maybe you can give Christine a ride to the hotel. We didn't have time to prepare our guest bedroom. Sorry, Kristen. I thought they would have time to complete the renovations before your arrival, and Greg's house is now full of guests. I don't want her to spend the night on the couch. Dylan tilted his head slightly. I will be glad. Christine, let me take you. Now I'll just grab the car keys. Christine did not expect such random plans, but she saw that Becky brought them together on purpose. And it wasn't that she was going to flirt, no. Although, to be honest, the feeling of someone else's interest awakened something in her that had been lost over the years of married life. And she followed Dylan to the exit. When they were in his black Land Rover, he turned on soft music and asked, How do you like our Bozeman? Christine sighed. It's a completely different world compared to Riverford. It's quiet and boring there, and here life is in full swing. That's only part of the truth, Dylan noted. But in any case, if you ever decide to move, I could help you find a job. Seriously, people with your charisma would be very useful to my company. She felt her heart beat faster. They were praising her. They saw potential in her. Thank you, that's very tempting, she said hesitantly. But I have a husband. He has no desire to move. Husband? Dylan glanced at the wedding ring on her finger. It's a pity, but who knows? Life is an unpredictable thing. He averted his eyes to the road, and the lights of the night Bozeman glided outside the window. Kristen thought, what if you finally decide? Somewhere in the depths of my consciousness, the thought of change, radical steps, was already smoldering. But for now, she only enjoyed the feeling of being noticed, appreciated, offered a future. Something that didn't exist in Riverford. This is how her first evening in the city went. Full of impressions, conversations, light flirting. And when she closed the door of the hotel room behind her, she felt that she did not want to return to that grayness. She felt good here, in the atmosphere of new opportunities. The next day, Becky showed Christine the sights of Bozeman, several shopping centers, a new park, a couple of stylish cafes. They went into an elite boutique together. Chris, try on this dress, Becky suggested, holding out an elegant outfit with a tag where the price was prohibitive for a salary from a Riverford pharmacy. Wow, you're crazy. It costs as much as my entire month's salary, Kristen exclaimed. Just try it on, my friend insisted. If you like it, I'll persuade Greg to give you a gift. Don't be shy, he's generous with me. Come on, Beck, I can't accept such an expensive gift, Christine refused, but deep down she really wanted to try on the thing. Silk, dark blue, with an elegant neckline. I don't even have anywhere to wear this. There's plenty in Bozeman, Becky grinned. Try it on, and then we'll see. Christine took the dress and went into the fitting room. As soon as she put it on and looked in the mirror, she saw another herself in the reflection, sophisticated, feminine, as if ready for a reception in a mansion. And at that moment her heart sank. Why can't I live like this forever? Why am I content with a piece of land by the lake? She came out to Becky so she could evaluate her. Wow, exclaimed the friend. Listen, this is yours. Seriously, you look like a movie heroine. You just need to be here, not in your Riverford. Kristen was confused. Come on, it's just a dress. A dress that reveals your femininity. If I were you, I wouldn't miss the chance. Look, in the morning we have breakfast in a cafe, during the day we can go shopping, and in the evening we can go to a club or restaurant. And your Mark? Has he ever taken you to a good restaurant? She shrugged her shoulders evasively. Well, in our town there is not much choice. Sometimes we have dinner at the only local maxi diner. But this is far from hot cuisine, of course. You see, Becky concluded, honestly, I always have a question. What keeps you there in Riverford? Christine thought while looking at herself in the mirror. I don't know myself. Maybe it's a habit. Maybe a sense of duty. Mark and I have been married for many years. It's kind of strange to give up everything. Becky looked at her with sympathy. Chris, you deserve to be happy. And if it's not in Riverford, then maybe it's in Bozeman. Listen, my husband is successful. His friend Dylan is also wealthy and free, by the way. Yes, it's true, he's not particularly burdened with love affairs, but he clearly liked you. Maybe you can work something out. Everything turned upside down for Kristen. After all, she had never thought about divorce seriously. But Becky's words made her heart beat faster. She took off the dress and hung it back on the hanger, watching the satin fabric shimmer in the lamplight. I don't know, Becky. I don't know yet. That evening, Becky invited guests to a nightclub in downtown Bozeman. Kristen was doubtful at first, but Dylan called her himself. His number apparently was from Becky and offered to pick her up. She agreed, and in the evening he appeared at the entrance to the hotel in his black SUV. Are you ready for another evening of discovery, Christine? He asked, opening the door on the passenger side. Yeah, I guess so, she chuckled, sitting down inside. And you never seem to get tired of the bustle of the city? Not at all. I feed on this fuss. Constant movement, deals, new projects, it gives me energy. People love construction projects, and I know how to sell them. I need to make noise, stick out in public. If I stop, my competitors will overtake me. She was drawn to him like a magnet. His life was so different from Mark's. A feeling of risk and drive. Maybe this is exactly what she was missing. They arrived at a club where live music was playing and a folk rock band was singing on stage. Dylan booked them a table where Becky and her husband and a couple of other mutual friends were already sitting. Christine felt unusually relaxed. People were laughing and flirting around her. Waiters were serving exotic cocktails. The aromas of perfume and perky voices were in the air. When they moved to the dance floor, Dylan took her hand and led her to the center. The music was energetic, and Christine shifted awkwardly from foot to foot at first, but then she let go and began to dance to the beat. Dylan held her by the waist, sometimes pressing her closer, looking straight into her eyes. And she, slightly belatedly, thought, I have a husband. But the feeling of guilt hardly had time to awaken in the festive atmosphere. You're good, Christine, he said in her ear to drown out the sound of the music. You shouldn't be hiding in your outback. Maybe in vain, she breathed. All my life I dreamed of something more. So get out of your comfort zone. Change starts with the first step, Dylan winked. She didn't answer, but her heart and mind were already on edge. It was the night of her little rebellion, to break out of her usual role, to experience the taste of the real life that she dreamed of. So they danced, drank cocktails, laughed at jokes until the night approached midnight. Then we got out of the club and decided to take a walk along the main street. The lights were still on in Bozeman, cars were still rushing by, and Christine, resting her hand on her temple, felt pleasantly dizzy. Do you mind if we take a walk? Dylan suggested. I want to get some fresh air. Of course I don't mind, she agreed. I'm already tired of loud music myself. They left the car in the parking lot and walked past the storefronts. Dylan talked about his construction company. I started with a small team that repaired dachas. Then he decided to expand, took out a loan, took a risk, and bought land for development. Gradually went on sale. Now I have a solid turnover, partners. That's very impressive, Christine said with genuine interest. And the family? He shrugged his shoulders vaguely. I'm not made for a family. I like freedom, relationships on my terms. I understand that you are married, but if suddenly you have a desire to change something in your life. His words sounded both inviting and frightening. Christine retreated subtly, as if afraid of her own desires. I don't know, she whispered. Thank you for speaking so frankly. He stopped and turned her towards him. If you don't know, then you will soon understand. Life is short, Christine. I see in you not just another woman, but a person who is suffocating in a cage. Do you want me to be the one to open the door? She looked into his eyes, feeling his heart beating. Of course, he did not promise her marriage, children, or anything else serious. He promised only freedom, drive, money, and luxury. What she missed so much in Riverford. Mark never gives me this, flashed through her head. Soon they drove back to the hotel. Before she left, Dylan held her hand. Tomorrow, I would like to take you to dinner at a French restaurant. If you agree, call me. Okay, she said. When she entered the room and closed the door behind her, all her thoughts were confused. On the one hand, the feeling inside said, "You're married, this is wrong." On the other hand, the voice of resentment. But Mark doesn't give you the joy you want, he doesn't want to change. And she lay down in bed, still not deciding what to do. But excitement beat in her chest, which was already pushing her into a new life. Almost a week flew by for Christine in Bozeman like a fairy tale dream. She dated Becky, visited shopping centers with her, and dined at expensive restaurants with Dylan and other friends. At first, she thought that this short adventure would end, and she would return to Riverford just with new experiences. But everything changed when Dylan quickly moved from compliments to closer communication. On her last night in Bozeman, she stayed in Dylan's penthouse, a beautiful, designer-furnished space overlooking the city at night. They sat on a leather sofa. Dylan poured wine into glasses. For you, Christine, he said, touching his glass to hers, you are becoming more and more courageous. I don't think I recognize myself, she admitted, taking a sip. It was as if something inside me had been released. And that's right. That's how it should be. You're not born for provincial life. He looked at her with that special look that made her forget about many things. Do you want to stay? For longer? She nodded in response, and he approached her. At that moment, Christine no longer thought about anything except the intoxicating atmosphere. She only knew that she was giving in to temptation, and then she might have to face the consequences, but that would come later. When Christine returned to Riverford, more than a week had passed than she had planned. Mark was sitting on the porch of their house and, seeing her luggage, frowned thoughtfully. Hello, she said, trying to appear calm. I was delayed. Sorry for not warning you in time. He looked at her silently. Anxiety and resentment were visible in his eyes. I was worried, he finally said. PY, didn't you answer calls? I tried to contact you. She looked down. She was probably busy. It's noisy, you know, Bozeman. Mark sighed heavily, got up from the porch, and entered the house. Okay, we still have to talk. She followed him. In the living room, everything was the same as before. A little disorder, boxes with Mark's tools. He sat down on the sofa. Sit down, Chris, he said without reproach in his voice, rather tiredly. She sat down next to him, trying not to look him in the eyes. Did something happen? Mark asked, finally making up his mind. You have become different, I feel. Christine could no longer hide it. She wanted to speak out. She understood that Mark deserved the truth, although the truth tore her heart. Mark, I met someone in Bozeman. His name is Dylan. He is the owner of a construction company, and feelings flared up between us, she blurted out, feeling her voice breaking. I didn't mean to, honestly, but I realized that I couldn't live as before. He turned pale, as if he didn't believe what he heard. So, you have an affair? he asked slowly. Yes, she admitted, biting her lip. There was a pause in which only the ticking of the old clock on the wall could be heard. Mark clenched his fists, then unclenched them. The words came to him with difficulty. And what do you want now? I can't live this life anymore, Mark. I'm suffocating in Riverford. I need freedom, new experiences. Dylan said he could help me move to Bozeman, find a job. She didn't finish, seeing how Mark's face was distorted by pain. He got up and walked around the room. He had always been a man of few words, but now he needed to express his shock. It turns out that I don't give you anything but boredom, right? He said. I thought we would be happy there. But it turns out you found someone else. Understand, I couldn't do otherwise, she said through pent-up tears. It seemed to me that we had no future. I'm tired of surviving, counting money, waiting for you to repair the next roof. I want to live differently. He looked at her silently. Then he said, If you want to leave, I won't stop you. But I beg you to understand, I truly loved you. I thought we were in the same boat. Christine felt acute pity for him, but at the same time she said, trying to be honest, I know you are a good person, Mark, but I need something different. Maybe someday you'll understand. He nodded, as if agreeing that there was no point in arguing. If this is your decision. His voice sounded muffled, as if half asleep. She stood up. Thank you. I'll go to Bozeman today. Dylan promised to send a car. Mark had a hard time hiding his pain. When the suitcase was packed, she walked to the doorway and turned around. P. Gromy, Christine whispered, I know I'm hurting you. He didn't answer. She quietly left the house. After some time, a car pulled up and she drove away. Evening silence fell over the house. Mark sat on the bed, clasping his head in his hands. He felt a sharp, burning pain, but did not cry. No tears came, and he was not used to crying. Only in my chest everything broke. Rumors spread instantly in a small town. By lunchtime, in a shop on the main street of Riverford, several women were whispering. They say Christine has left. To Dylan. What's his last name? Morrison. He has money, a big company. So she switched sides. How are you now, Mark? Who knows? He has a character, he won't say a word. He will withdraw and worry about everything himself. Jenny, who had known Mark for a long time since school, was selling behind the counter, and she involuntarily listened to these conversations indignantly. Listen, women, maybe stop procrastinating on other people's grief. Better help Mark, offer support. But they just shrugged their shoulders, and when they left, they continued to whisper. Thus began for Mark a period of other people's sympathy, which he did not ask for and did not want to tolerate. Silence is what haunted Mark in the following days. Christine left, and the house was empty. In the mornings, he no longer heard her making coffee and muttering irritably if her toast was burnt. The living room sofa was missing the soft blanket she always brought with her. The bathroom cabinet was now empty. Creams, lotions, and hair clips had disappeared. Sometimes, waking up in the morning, Mark automatically stretched out his hand to the side where Christine usually slept and felt only the coolness of the sheets. At such moments, he wanted to scream from loneliness, but he is used to keeping everything to himself. So I just sighed, got up, and went to work. The day after she left, Mark received a text message from an old friend, Tom Henderson. Mate, how are you? Do you want me to come see you in the evening? Mark remained silent and did not answer. He didn't want to talk about anything, much less explain why his wife left. Christine's sister, Sarah, called later asking, Is this true? Has Christine left? What happened to you? Mark answered dryly, We broke up. It's better to ask her yourself, and hung up. At work, and he continued to repair roofs, build fences, help renovate barns. Clients looked at him with pity, like, poor guy, and some didn't know what to say at all. Mark worked even more intently than before and spoke even less. When your wife leaves for someone else, and the whole city is already gossiping, any words of sympathy can hurt more than silence. One evening, after finishing replacing pipes for one farmer, Mark saw that he was looking at him as if he wanted to start an uncomfortable conversation. The farmer, a heavy-set man of about 50, raised his eyebrows. "Mark, maybe my wife and I could invite you to dinner. Well, support." Mark answered politely but firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Brown, but I'd rather be alone." The farmer looked down. "Okay, if anything, know that you have friends here." The hardest part was the transition from the evenings he once spent with Christine to evenings when there was no one in the house. One of these evenings, unable to bear it, he went to the lake where he had a plot, the one for which he had worked for many years. He drove his old pickup truck to the shore, where the wind stirred the reeds and carried light gusts of coolness. The sun was setting, coloring the water in golden scarlet tones. Mark got out of the car and walked along the future construction perimeter. He used to imagine how he would bring Christine here and show where the walls of their house would be, where the veranda would be, and where the summer kitchen would be. But now this dream has turned into a caustic wound. His plan to build a house and live happily has collapsed. He sat down on a fallen tree near the shore, took off his shoes, and dipped his feet into the cool water. Silence enveloped from all sides. Deep down, he knew that he could give up the site, sell it, pay off the loans, and try to start again in another place. But something inside told me, don't do this. The earth is your support. Build a house, even if you now live in it alone, or with someone else who wants to share your life. The idea that this house could be for anyone other than Christine seemed strange, almost treacherous. He still loved her and couldn't just replace his wife. But I understood that life does not stop, and if he has the strength to continue building, even without support, then he must build. I won't become an alcoholic or kill myself, he thought, gazing into the trembling surface of the lake. I'll work. Let this heal a mental wound like a bandage heals a cut. Someday I will wake up and the pain will subside. He sat there until darkness, speaking quietly out loud, as if addressing the lake, the water, the ghost of his former life. Chris, if you knew how much I wanted everything to be different, but I couldn't force myself to keep it. Maybe this is better than living a lie. When Mark returned to the car, he made a decision not to sell the plot. On the contrary, he will complete this house. Even if you have to do it in the evenings, after your main job, even if no one will help. He will do it. For myself. And what will happen next time will tell. The emptiness he felt was bottomless. But sometimes emptiness is space for something new. Perhaps he did not yet know what exactly would fill it, but life went on. Several weeks have passed. Mark entered his new state to work during the day, and in the evening to go to the site and gradually begin construction. Of course, he couldn't lift the house alone in one day. First, it was necessary to resolve issues with the foundation, buy consumables, and prepare drawings. During the day, he continued to take orders in the city. Repair cars, install fences, repair roofs. He was a fitter, carpenter, mechanica universal, jack of all trades, who was valued for his accuracy and honesty. Neighbors advised to contact him because he did not gouge prices and did not disappear on drunkenness, as other workers sometimes did. This is how Mark earned money for construction. After work, he loaded bags of cement, boards, nails, and tools into his pickup truck. Sometimes Tom Henderson helped him, the same friend who at first did not dare to ask, but later still came and said, "Listen, Mark, don't be a bitch. I want to help, and I myself am interested in tinkering at a construction site." During those same days, Mark was shopping for lumber and cement at the local building materials market when he accidentally ran into a woman he had never seen before in Riverford. It happened on a sunny day near a warehouse where there were boxes of tools. Mark, unloading bags of mixture from his pickup truck, heard a woman's voice behind him. "Excuse me, can you tell me where I can buy good protective gloves? I was just in the pavilion, but everything there is too big." He turned around and saw a slender woman of about 30 with a shock of brown hair pulled back into a ponytail. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. Her face was slightly tanned. The eyes looked straight and confident. "Gloves?" he asked again. There should be a stand with special clothing at the corner of the warehouse. You will also find gloves there in different sizes. She smiled. Thank you. I just arrived recently and don't yet know where everything is. My name is Lauren. Lauren Bishop. Mark nodded, putting the bag aside. Mark Whitman. Nice to meet you. It turns out that you are engaged in construction. She laughed. My grandfather is sick. I came to look after him. He lives about 3 miles from here, but his old barn is falling apart, and I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. I decided to patch up the boards myself, tighten them where necessary. I learned this when I lived in another town. Mark saw sincere determination in her eyes, which surprised him somewhat. Not many women were willing to repair old barns with their own hands. If you want, I can help with advice. I'm just interested in construction, he said. Oh, that would be great. Lauren responded quickly. I am a paramedic by profession, but I like to work with my hands. I think grandfather will be pleased. She smiled so sincerely that Mark involuntarily felt the shadow of recent pain dissolve slightly. There was no skepticism, no pity, no hidden irony in her voice. She said that she had known him for a long time. I'll stay here for another 10 minutes, choosing materials. If anything, please contact me, he said. Let's think together which boards are better. Okay, she nodded and went to the shelves where the gloves were. Mark watched out of the corner of his eye as Lauren, trying on the gloves, sighed and wrinkled her forehead, checking to see if they were too big. He felt a strange warmth arising inside, but immediately tried to drown it out. I'm not ready for any new acquaintances. However, in recent weeks, he increasingly felt life goes on, and there are people around who do not care about his past failures. And this brought into his everyday life a slight shade of positivity which was so lacking. Soon they crossed paths at the cash register. Lauren held several boards in her hands, tied with rope, and pocketed a pair of those same gloves. How did you even get here? She asked, smiling. I thought there was nothing in this outback but farmland. Riverford is small, yes, but you can live here if you like silence. I've been here all my life. I'm from Colorado myself, Lauren explained. There are mountains there, also quiet places, but the city is bigger. I work as a paramedic in an ambulance, and now that my grandfather was sick, I decided to move in with him for a while. We'll see, maybe for a long time. Mark picked up her heavy bunch of boards, seeing that she was uncomfortable. Let me help you carry it to the car. Thanks a lot. My car is over there, a red pickup truck. They reached the car. Lauren opened the tailgate and Mark carefully loaded the boards. So you work in an ambulance? He asked again. It must not be easy. Yeah, you see all sorts of things, but I like helping people. It's fair. At least I know I'm doing something useful. What do you do besides construction? Mark shook his head. Jack of all trades. Repairing cars, roofing, whatever. I'm saving up for a house by the lake. Having said about the house, he felt a slight pain inside, but tried to hide it. Lauren asked animatedly, House by the lake? Wow, that sounds romantic. He paused, not knowing whether to tell the details about the divorce. Yes, this is my old dream. I've already started building something. Lauren looked inspired. If this is your dream, then I wish you good luck. I always like it when people follow their plans. It's not easy, though. Thank you, Mark said quietly, closing the side of the pickup. If you want, let me know when you're working on the shed. I can stop by and help with advice or tools. Lauren smiled. Great, I will be grateful. I live with my grandfather Jacob Bishop. Maybe you know? His house is at the end of the old farm road. Bishop. Yes, I think I heard. Okay, then maybe I'll take a look. They said their goodbyes and Mark went back to his shopping. In the following days, encouraged by the meeting with Lauren, although he was afraid to admit it to himself, Mark became even more active in preparing the foundation for the future house by the lake. He hired a small excavator to dig a foundation pit for the supports. Tom Henderson came to help. Listen, I'm glad you finally moved, Tom said, throwing stones out of the future foundation. I thought you'd go on a drinking binge after all this. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead. It's not my business to go on drinking bouts. Better to work. That's right, Tom nodded. Look, you'll build a house soon. Mark smiled wryly, remembering how he had planned this house for two. But now his persistence seemed to have strengthened. I'll finish the construction, even to spite fate. In the evenings, when he was already tired and leaving the site, he thought about Lauren. How is she doing, repairing the shed or taking care of her grandfather? He did not dare to appear at her place without an invitation, but he called once he found the number in the telephone directory, because Grandfather Bishop had long been registered with the city doctor. Lauren, this is Mark Whitman. I wanted to ask how things are going with your shed, he said into the phone, nervously, as if he was calling on a date. Lauren laughed. Mark, I just wanted to contact you today. I'm a little confused by the beams on the roof of the barn. They seem to be rotten. He offered to come over the next day. She readily agreed. While Mark was establishing his new rhythm, Christine Whitman was in Bozeman, in a world that at first seemed like a dream to her. She lived with Dylan Morrison, settling in his spacious apartment with panoramic windows. At first, she enthusiastically immersed herself in the local party life, shopping in expensive boutiques, dinners in restaurants, parties with Dylan's wealthy acquaintances. But after a month, this bright tinsel began to fade. Dylan, immersed in his construction projects, came home late, sometimes having noisy meetings with colleagues where Christine felt like an outsider. Instead of intimate conversations, a cold, "Hello, I'm tired, don't bother me." Instead of plans for a future together, there are fragments of phrases. "Go wherever you want, just send me an estimate of expenses." One morning, Christine woke up without finding Dylan in bed. There was a note on the table. "I went on a business trip for a couple of days. There's no food in the refrigerator. Order something for yourself." Christine stood with a piece of paper in her hands, feeling a wave of resentment rising inside. He didn't even bother to say where he was going. She spent the day alone, wandering around the apartment, trying to watch TV, read magazines, but everything was annoying. She remembered how, although Mark had a routine life, he always found a few minutes in the evening to ask how things were going. She felt sad, because for Dylan, it seemed, she was just a temporary companion, from whom nothing was required other than external attractiveness. Against the backdrop of growing emptiness, Christine began to notice that her cycle was out of whack. Morning sickness and dizziness appeared. At first, she attributed this to stress, but then, having bought a test at the pharmacy, she received confirmation. 2 stripes. Pregnancy. Panic overwhelmed her. What now? What will Dylan say? He didn't tell me anything about family, about children. In the evening, when Dylan returned from a business trip, she gathered her will into a fist. "Dylan, I need to talk to you," she said, trying not to shake. He unfastened his cufflinks, wincing with displeasure. "Speak quickly. I now have a video call with my partners." "I'm pregnant," Christine blurted out. He raised his eyebrows, glancing at her, as if checking if she was joking. "How is it? Pregnant? How many weeks?" "Probably 5 or 6, she answered quietly. "I took a test. I'll go to the doctor tomorrow." Dylan put down his cufflinks and sighed heavily. "So, wait a minute. Come on, don't panic. What are you going to do?" "I wanted to know your opinion. This is your child, after all." He pursed his lips. "Honestly, I didn't plan a family. I don't have the time or desire to be a father. Of course, if you give birth, I will help financially. But I'm not ready for someone else to marry or move in. We need to behave within reason." "Do you know what I mean?" Christine felt cold inside. "Within reason" sounded like we were talking about expenses for another project, and not about a child. She involuntarily exclaimed, "But this is your child." Dylan shrugged and walked up to her, looking straight into her eyes. "I don't mind if you give birth. I will help as much as I can. I will pay for the hospital. But if you expect that we will formalize the relationship, that you will bear my last name or something else, then, alas, I have my own life and affairs." He said this in a dry, almost businesslike tone. Christine choked with resentment. So you think that I should be grateful to you for the money and not count on my family? About that, he confirmed briefly, I said I'm not a family man. She realized that her entire idea of a happy new life had crumbled to dust. How could she not have noticed earlier that Dylan is a person accustomed to taking, not sharing? Its shine was just a facade without warmth. The following weeks were difficult for Christine. Toxicosis, eternal fatigue, and next to me was Dylan, who was constantly missing at work. He sometimes threw money at her, as if hoping that she would not annoy him. He reacted irritably to her attempts to talk about the future and left, slamming the door. Becky tried to console her friend, but she herself had her own family matters. Greg, Becky's husband, looked jealously at the fact that some Christine appeared in their house too often, complaining about life and ruining the atmosphere. And Becky was not eager to get involved in other people's problems. Kristen found herself in an unfamiliar city without moral support, with a pregnancy that she didn't know how to handle. Some nights she would lie in bed and think, what if I hadn't left Mark? After all, we had problems. But he wouldn't turn his back on the child. But then she remembered how unhappy she was in Riverford, and her anger at herself only grew. After a couple of months, realizing that Dylan was not going to change, Christine made the decision, I can't do this anymore. Maybe I'll go back to Riverford and rent a place. After all, there are native places there, even with bad memories. The pregnancy was approaching a critical stage. She felt loneliness and fear. She just wanted to hide somewhere so that no one would look at her with contempt. I'm moving, she told him when he returned late that evening. I'm going back to Riverford. He barely looked up from his laptop. Do as you please. Invoices for the birth, you can send them to me. Do you even care? He winced slightly. Christine, we are not children. I immediately said that I was not planning a serious relationship. Apparently, you just didn't hear. I don't mind if you give birth, but I won't invest emotionally, so let's make no scenes. She silently turned and went to pack her things into her suitcase. A bitter silence swirled behind the wall. Everything that seemed beautiful to her about Dylan disappeared like a mirage. All that was left was a cold calculation and a devastated soul. Returning to Riverford, Christine rented a room above the pharmacy where she had previously worked. Sometimes small premises for pharmacists or guests are equipped under pharmacies, an old building, but rented out for a nominal fee. It was enough for her to close the door and be alone when her belly was already growing and attracting prying eyes. Month after month, the pregnancy progressed as usual. Kristen began to rarely go out so as not to hear judgmental gossip. Soon it was time to give birth. It happened on a rainy evening. Contractions began unexpectedly, and she had to almost take a taxi to get to the local hospital. There was no loving husband nearby, no caring friend, only doctors and nurses who quickly registered her in the maternity ward. The son was born with a loud cry. Christine named him Trevor. When they brought him to her, wrapped in a blanket, she felt tears of joy for the first time in months. This little lump was now her main support. Dylan sent a check to cover part of the expenses, but he didn't even show up. Remind me if anything else needs to be paid, he wrote in a dry message. Christine looked at the phone, feeling a sickening resentment rise in her throat. Is that all he can do? Reduce me to an expense item. After being discharged, she returned to her room above the pharmacy, where she quickly set up a children's area, a small cradle, a changing table. There was almost no money left because she could not work full-time. There was an agreement with the owner of the pharmacy that Christine would go out for a couple of hours if she did not find a nanny. But the nanny was expensive. It looks like we'll have to get out, she concluded gloomily to herself, looking at little Trevor. I chose this path myself, and now I can't go back to Mark to ask for help. He won't accept me after everything. Meanwhile, news quickly spread throughout the city. Christine is back pregnant. The baby has already been born. Someone whispered that it was, of course, Dylan's son. Someone felt sorry for Christine. Someone, on the contrary, said that she herself was to blame. These rumors also reached Mark, although no one was in a hurry to tell him directly. One day, when he was repairing a tractor for a farmer in the workshop, he scratched the back of his head and carefully asked, "Mark, did you hear that your ex-wife gave birth to a boy?" Mark straightened up and froze, as if he had been hit on the head. He knew that Christine was expecting a child, but did not hear the exact date. "Yes, I heard it out of the corner of my ear," he answered dryly, trying not to betray his emotions. "Maybe you should come in and have a look," the farmer suggested. "Still a baby." Mark shook his head negatively. "It's none of my business. She has a different life now." The farmer sighed noisily. "Yes, I understand. But you still lived together for many years." Mark remained silent. When the farmer left, he sat down on a stool and dropped his hands on his knees. The news that Christine was already a mother brought back painful memories of how he, too, had dreamed of having children someday in the home he and Christine shared. Now his dreams remain unfulfilled. He felt a strange cocktail of emotions: pain, jealousy, a nagging sense of loss, and also some kind of pity for her, because he knew that she was probably not coping alone. Saya. But he forced himself to push these feelings away. She had made her choice, and it was better for him not to interfere so as not to tear the wound apart again. Kristen, left virtually broke, was forced to work part-time at a pharmacy when someone could babysit Trevor. Christine's mother, who lives in a neighboring town, rarely came and looked at her daughter with condemnation. "I warned you that this would happen." Christine clenched her teeth and endured, trying not to become despondent. The child cried at night, demanded attention, and there was almost not enough money for a normal pediatrician. Trevor grew up restless and often suffered from colds. Doctors said he needed more fresh air, stable care, and good nutrition. "Where can I get this?" Christine thought, remembering how naively she imagined the luxury life in Bozeman. Now her life was harsh and devoid of illusions, as if reality was punishing her for the collapse of her previous relationship. And yet, deep down in her soul, she understood. This is her child, and in him she must find the strength to continue. And even though the city, which she called a swamp, turned out to be her last anchor, this is the price of the choice she made. One day, Mark decided to stop by the house of Jacob Bishop, Lauren's grandfather, to help fix the rotten beams on the old barn. He parked his pickup truck at the rusty gate and heard the entrance gate creaking. The yard was vast: an old flower bed with withered flowers, a rickety fence, and a low house with a sloping roof. Jacob himself stood on the porch thin, with a wrinkled face, but with some kind of inner strength in his gaze. "You seem to be the same Mark Whitman?" asked the old man, narrowing his eyes. "Yes, sir. Lauren said you wouldn't mind if I stopped by to look at the barn." "Well, since they've already arrived, go and have a look," he chuckled. "My granddaughter told me to be lenient with your enthusiasm. Although, to be honest, it was she who rushed there with a hammer, but I'm worried that the beams might collapse." Lauren came out of the house, wearing jeans and a work shirt, with sparkling eyes. "Mark, it's great that you came. I've already tried to strengthen something, but it's obvious that part of the sheathing needs to be changed. I'm afraid I don't have enough experience." "Let's take a look together," Mark answered. Old Bishop, for all his grumbling, was clearly glad that there was a person who understood construction matters. When Mark and Lauren went to the barn, he remained standing on the porch, coughing and watching them with his eyes. The barn was small, and there was chaos inside: tools, old equipment, boxes with all sorts of junk. The beams under the roof were actually rotten. A couple of them were cracked and were held together only by a good word. Lauren frowned. "I'm afraid that at any moment this could fall on our heads. That's why I called you, Mark." He took a flashlight from the car and raised his head to the ceiling. "We'll have to replace a couple of rafters and some of the boards on the roof. It would also be good to patch up the cracks between the walls. I think we can do it in a couple of days if we work together." "Great. I'm ready to knead dirt, saw wood, and paint if only my grandfather would stop worrying," Lauren said with a smile. "And then he endlessly swears that I can't do hard work. But I'm not afraid." "It's obvious," Mark commented briefly. He felt how, in her presence, lightness was born inside. She was a man of action whose hands did not tremble before difficult tasks. They made a plan. The next day, buy the necessary lumber, dismantle part of the roof, and strengthen the rafter system. Lauren suggested, we have a small supply of wood behind the house. My grandfather once harvested it. Let's try to use it to save money. However, I'm not sure what condition she's in. Show me, we'll see, Mark nodded. They left the barn, walking around the other side of the house. There really was a stack of boards there, although they looked old and cracked. Mark carefully checked several pieces. Some can be used, some are already too moldy. He explained why it was better to throw some away. Lauren listened carefully, nodded, and asked questions. When they finished and were about to leave, Lauren suggested, "Listen, maybe I'll cook something to eat and you can stay for lunch. Grandfather is sleeping now. I just have time to build something simple." Mark hesitated for a moment, worried that it was too homey. But Lauren looked kindly, without hints. "Okay," he agreed. "I haven't eaten anything except coffee since the morning anyway." They entered the house. Lauren quickly put together scrambled eggs and ham and chopped up some fresh vegetables. Mark helped and added salt as best he could. There was a pleasant smell of fried eggs in the kitchen. In the depths of the house, the grandfather's hoarse coughing could be heard, but he, apparently, was in no hurry to get up. "How long have you been in Riverford?" Mark asked, sitting down at the table. "Yes, for a long time," Lauren answered. "And before that I lived in Colorado, worked as a paramedic in an ambulance. I hadn't seen my grandfather for a long time until I found out that his heart disease had worsened. I arrived, and here. I even like this silence, really. I thought it would be boring, but it turned out that the town, although small, was cute." She spoke smiling, and Mark conveyed her calm mood. He felt a pang of conscience for a moment. "But I also believed that Christine would appreciate the calmness of Riverford, but it turned out differently for her." Not wanting to remember the past, he just nodded. "I've been here all my life. I once dreamed of moving somewhere bigger, but then I realized that I love this place, especially the lake outside the city." "Lauren," he unexpectedly continued, "thank you for, just like that, not asking unnecessary questions about me. Many people here know my story with my wife and—" He hesitated, not knowing how to finish. She looked at him softly. "I heard something, but not in detail. And to be honest, I think that everyone has the right to their own personal space and pain. I'm not going to judge." Mark sighed with relief. He felt unusually comfortable in her company. Sometimes warm human communication is more valuable than long questions. It's been a few weeks since Mark and Lauren started fixing up the shed. They worked harmoniously. They sawed boards and replaced rotten rafters. Jacob Bishop, although he grumbled about his granddaughter, whom "it's not proper for a girl to carry heavy things," was secretly glad that the house and barn were in good hands. One morning Lauren had to go to the pharmacy to buy medicine for her grandfather. Mark promised to stop by after lunch to finish the roof of the barn. But at noon, he suddenly received a call from her. "Mark, hi. Listen, my car won't start. I don't know what happened, and I urgently need to bring medicine to my grandfather." Hearing her excited voice, he reassured. "Don't panic. I'll be right there. Where are you?" "I'm at the pharmacy, near the central square. I was waiting for it to start on its own, but no." "Okay, I'm on my way." Mark took the toolbox and got into his pickup truck. He found Lauren standing by the red SUV. She opened the hood slightly, trying to see what was wrong. It was cold and windy outside, and an autumn drizzle was approaching. "Wait, we'll see now," Mark said, getting out of the car. He checked the battery, terminals, spark plugs. A few minutes under the hood, and I soon diagnosed the problem. Something with the wiring and starter. "I won't fix it right here, but I'll try to get it going," he concluded. "As a last resort, we will tow it away." After several manipulations with the wires and light blows on the starter, the car finally started, albeit with difficulty. Hooray! Lauren was delighted, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Thank you, Mark. I was afraid that I would have to call a tow truck." He grinned. Yeah, well, we'll make do. I'll replace a couple of parts for you later in the workshop. You can get there now, but try not to turn off the engine until you get back. Understood. Listen, as a token of gratitude, I want to invite you to dinner. How about you come over to my place tonight and I'll cook something delicious? Mark was a little taken aback by such directness. Oh, thank you. This is unexpected. But I don't mind. He himself, to be honest, felt attracted to her sociability and kindness. However, he still did not fully trust his new feelings after breaking up with his wife. But curiosity and mutual sympathy were already attracting them to each other. Great, Lauren smiled. Then come at 7. There's definitely some raw chicken in the refrigerator somewhere, so I'll try to cook something worthwhile. He's coming, he answered briefly, trying to contain his growing inner excitement. In the evening, when twilight shrouded the city, Mark drove up to the bishop's house. Lauren opened the door for him in an apron, and behind her the aromas of baked chicken with herbs and baked potatoes swayed. Come in, she invited. Grandfather dozed off. I hope he doesn't wake up before dinner is over. It was warm inside, and a simple lamp was burning on the table, giving the kitchen a cozy feel. Lauren covered the tablecloth, set out the plates and vegetable salad. Mark sat down, feeling that he had not experienced such pleasant excitement from a visit to a woman for a long time, albeit without romantic overtones. But it was hard to deny that sparks were already flying between them. Listen, I wanted to talk. Lauren began hesitantly as they began to eat. You don't mind, do you? Of course not, Mark answered, busy cutting up a piece of chicken. She put down her fork and looked at him directly. I'm interested to know about your plans, about the house by the lake. What does this mean to you? It took him a second to compose himself. You know, this is my old dream. I once thought that I would build a house for my family. Well, you probably know about my ex-wife. He swallowed the lump in his throat. It didn't work out, but I decided not to give up the idea. I'm building it for myself. Maybe for the future, I don't know. Lauren nodded understandingly. Understand. We can't always keep people, but dreams shouldn't die, right? These words touched him. She didn't say anything unnecessary. She just understood how important it was. And you yourself? Mark asked. You said that you worked in Colorado, but decided to move to your grandfather. How long will you stay here? I don't know yet, Lauren admitted. My grandfather has heart disease. Doctors say he needs constant monitoring. I took a vacation and quit my previous job. Perhaps I'll get a job as a nurse at our local clinic if there are vacancies. And I basically feel good here. Calmly, I'm tired of the eternal sirens and city rush. They talked about life and shared stories. Mark felt his heart warm. Lauren seemed like someone who saw beauty in simple things like himself. There was no snobbery or pretension in her. When they finished eating, Lauren brought tea with fresh herbs to the table. I collected these herbs behind the house in the summer, she smiled. Grandfather says it's good for the heart. Mark took a sip of the drink. The aroma rose to his nose, refreshing his mind. He looked up at Lauren and felt like he trusted her like he hadn't trusted anyone since his breakup. Thank you for dinner. You really are a master at cooking, he said, getting up from the table. It's nothing. She moved a chair, putting away the dishes. I'm glad you liked it. On the way out, near the door, they paused. Mark impulsively wanted to hug her, but restrained himself, afraid of seeming intrusive. Lauren herself touched his hand. You are a good person, Mark Whitman. I hope we will see each other again and again. He smiled, feeling gratitude towards fate for this moment spreading in his chest like a warm stream. See you, for sure. When he left, a farewell ray of autumn sunset light slid across her face, and Mark, getting into the pickup truck, could not wipe the slight smile from his lips. There was a quiet but persistent feeling inside. Maybe something new is really starting in my life. Autumn rains washed away the paint from a low-quality batch of timber, and Mark had to redo part of the external walls. On another such evening, he tiredly fell onto a stack of boards, looking at the sky overcast with clouds. Lauren arrived shortly after her shift at the local dispensary, She was still hired part-time so she could take care of her grandfather. She brought 2 thermal bags, one with hot stew, the other with coffee. "Are you tired?" she asked with sympathy, placing the food next to him. "Yes, a little," Mark admitted. "But we've almost finished the frame, just a couple more days, and we can finish the roof." "That's great," Lauren said warmly. "I would like to stay here if I don't bother you. Let's eat together." They sat down on a piece of plywood and spread out a blanket. The damp wind blew across their faces, but the hot stew and coffee warmed them. Mark looked at the not yet finished walls, imagining how soon a porch would appear here and then a veranda. "You know, Lauren," he said quietly, "I once wanted to build this house for 2. For a long time I thought that, having lost that family, I had lost my meaning. But now I understand. The point is not to catch up with someone else's dream, but to live in a way that is close to you. And if there is a person nearby who also cares about this, then so much the better." He looked into her eyes. She carefully placed her hand on his arm. "I understand that you have gone through a difficult story, and I'm not going to rush things myself. But I feel comfortable here next to you. I like this place, these mountains, the lake. I like your character when you are focused, stubborn. I think I'd like to live in a house like this one day." Mark felt his heart pounding faster. "I will be glad if you stay," he said, a little embarrassed. They hugged simply in a friendly way, but in this hug there was already a nascent intimacy. A few weeks later, the house already had a roof, rough electrical work, and even some plumbing had been installed inside. The foundation, walls, windows, everything took a lot of time and effort. But Mark didn't complain. He spent every free minute at the construction site, and Lauren was often nearby. One evening, they sat together on the yet unfinished veranda. The floorboards crunched underfoot. A lake stretched out in front of them, over which the fog lay softly. The sky was lavender from the setting sun. "Have you ever seen a sky like this?" Lauren asked, clinging to Mark. "Looks like it was painted in watercolors." "Yes, I saw it, but I'm surprised every time," he answered, hugging her shoulders. They were silent for several moments, listening to the splash of water. Then Mark plucked up his courage. "You know, Lauren," I wanted to say, "this house is not only mine. I now understand that I am not building it for loneliness. I want you to feel like this is your home too." She looked up, the last rays of the sunset reflected in her eyes. "Mark." He turned slightly to her and took her hand in his. "I don't know where you'll be in a year, whether you'll want to go back to Colorado or somewhere else. But I ask you, think about staying with me, here." Lauren smiled, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. "I've already thought about it, and I want to stay." At that moment they kissed without awkwardness, without haste. In the quiet light of the passing day there was a promise: "We are together." And although no formal words about the engagement were spoken, it had already happened in their hearts. Months passed. The house by the lake has finally acquired its completed form. Mark and Lauren formalized their relationship at the local city hall, inviting only a few close friends and relatives. Everything was done modestly, but sincerely. Lauren did not dream of lavish celebrations, and Mark preferred not to do a show. They held a small ceremony in the city park. A local pastor read the words of blessing. A couple of neighbors played the guitar. Random passers-by happily waved at them as a sign of congratulations. Tom Henderson, Mark's friend, brought a huge basket of flowers and honey to the ceremony, saying, "Let life be as sweet, my friend." After exchanging rings, guests moved to the courtyard of a local eatery where a simple buffet was served. Jacob Bishop, leaning on a crutch, walked towards the newlyweds and said, "I'm glad that my granddaughter found a good man. I used to look at you, Mark, with narrowed eyes, but now I see you are after her heart. I give you my old tractor and a small apiary behind the house. May it bring you good luck." "Tractor?" Mark laughed. "I'll be happy to dig into it and repair it." "Thank you, Mr. Bishop." "Call me grandfather," answered the old man, and although he spoke grumpily, his eyes sparkled with pride. A few months after their wedding, Lauren told Mark that she was pregnant. He was happy, although he was worried, remembering how he once dreamed of a family with Christine and everything collapsed. But now everything was different. Lauren was not like Christine, either in character or in her views. A girl was born. She was named Sadie. She was born in a new house, where by that time they had installed all the amenities. Lauren was happy, although she was tired from sleepless nights. Mark helped diligently and tiptoed around the house so as not to wake the baby. I didn't even think that I would bother with diapers, he smiled, rocking the baby in his arms. And this is not scary at all. Lauren just laughed gently. This is how they lived their everyday lives in a harmony that Mark had not known before. And even if they had minor difficulties, they tried to solve them together, without reproaches or drama. Unfortunately, Jacob Bishop's health was deteriorating. He lived a little more than a year after the wedding, but in the end his heart disease prevailed. The farewell was quiet, in a small circle. Lauren, holding her daughter close to her, looked at the coffin in which her grandfather lay and cried quietly. He saw that we were happy. Mark consoled her, hugging her tightly. I think he left with peace in his soul. The mayor's office issued documents for the old man's house and a small plot of land with an apiary in favor of Lauren. So they started a small farm, several beehives, a dilapidated tractor, which Mark now loved to repair and sometimes tinker in the field. Life flowed slowly, filled with activities and care. The city looked at them and saw a clear picture. Mark had found a new family and became an even calmer and happier person. Lauren glowed with optimism, and little Sadie grew up to be a healthy, smiling girl. Several years flew by unnoticed. In Riverford, everything flowed slowly, as always. The same streets, the same neighbors, sometimes city fairs were held. Christine lived here all this time, raising Trevor, who had already learned to walk and talk. Money was still tight, but Christine held on. She worked in a pharmacy and received occasional tranches from Dylan, who showed no other involvement in his son's life. One sunny day, an annual fair was held in the central square. Farmers sold honey, vegetables, fruits, and artisans exhibited their crafts. Mark, Lauren, and daughter Sadie also came, firstly, to unwind, and secondly, they sold their honey after all. The apiary brought in a small but pleasant income. Kristen came there with Trevor. The child ran tirelessly among the counters, grabbing apples and candies. She sometimes pulled her son back, but she saw that he was having fun and tried not to interfere. And suddenly she noticed Mark standing in a row of stalls, next to Lauren in a light summer dress, and between them a little girl with curls, giggling animatedly. All three of them looked so harmonious, like a real family. Christine felt her insides shrink. Before, she had imagined many times that one day she would see Mark with another woman. But the reality was still painful. He looked happy and calm. Lauren smiled at him. Mark hugged his daughter. This is what my life should have looked like if, Christine's thought burned. She tried to hide in the crowd, but Mark noticed her and nodded politely, without any malice. Christine automatically stepped forward, hugging Trevor to her. Hello, she said quietly, realizing that this was their first face-to-face meeting in a long time. Mark responded in the same quiet tone. Hello, Chris. Lauren, realizing the awkwardness of the situation, took her daughter in her arms and walked over to the counter, giving them a chance to talk. Christine wanted to say 1,000 things. I'm sorry, it's my fault that I left. I'm sorry, I paid too much for my mistake. But I couldn't. Finally, she said, Is this your daughter? Yes, Sadie, Mark nodded. She is almost 3 years old. Christine smiled, although tears appeared in her eyes. She's beautiful. Thank you. He glanced briefly at Trevor, whom Christine was holding by the hand. Your son? Yes, Trevor. He's 4. Trevor looked at Mark with curiosity, but soon became distracted by the apple he was gnawing on. Christine swallowed the lump in her throat. He gets sick a little often. Sometimes he has bronchitis, but I can cope. Mark looked at her with slight sympathy. Understand. I hope everything goes well for you. Their conversation ended there. The past hung between them, but time had erased the former sharpness of pain. Now all that remained was quiet regret and the realization that they were going down different paths. Christine watched Mark walk back to Lauren. She gently touches his hand, bowing her head, and little Sadie babbles something cheerfully to her father. This is a real family, Christine thought, and looking at her son, she hugged him to her. I have Trevor. There is no more fairy tale, but there is reality, and I know the value of this. Another moment and Mark, Lauren, and the child disappeared into the crowd. Christine sighed, feeling as if a weight was slowly being lifted from her soul. The former jealousy and annoyance were replaced by quiet humility. She looked at her son, at his smile, stained with apple juice. Come on, Trevor, she said tenderly. We'll buy you a toy. They moved through the bustle of the fair, and one thought sounded in Christine's head. Now I don't expect fairy tales, but at least I know what the wrong choice costs. Suddenly, she remembered the words from an old book. You can't bring back the past, but you can live on, understanding its lessons. That's what she did. She went her way, holding her son's hand, leaving behind all her unfulfilled dreams. A soft breeze shook the tops of the pines, rustled the leaves in the coastal thickets, and rippled the surface of the lake in gentle circles. The air in September was already a little cool, but still breathed the memory of summer. Mark Whitman sat on a low bench made of roughly sanded timber. In fact, he knocked it down himself from the remains of boards when he was just beginning to arrange this corner by the water. Now, years later, the bench has become a familiar element of his space. Here he loved to take a break from everyday worries, peering into the quiet surface and thinking about the things that shaped him. His son, Harry, sat next to him. The boy had recently turned 6 years old, inquisitive, smart, with clear blue eyes inherited from his mother and a determined squint that involuntarily reminded Mark of himself as a child. Harry was holding in his hands a small boat carved from wood. Homemade toys were generally in use in the Whitman family. Mark and Tom Henderson, a longtime friend, carved this boat from a piece of pine. Harry liked to float it on the water when the lake was calm. They sat side by side, and the quiet harmony of the early evening fell on their shoulders like an invisible blanket. Mark watched his son, feeling a familiar warm sensation in his chest, a mixture of pride, tenderness, and gratitude that life gives a person a second chance. Once upon a time, many years ago, he imagined how he would sit on this very shore with his child. Then it seemed to him that his life would go one way, but reality chose another. And yet here he is, and his son is nearby, and in the house, visible further up the hill, his wife Lauren is preparing dinner with their daughter Sadie. Quiet happiness that does not shout about itself, does not require magnificent confirmation, it simply exists. Harry fidgeted, trying to sit more comfortably, then looked at his father and asked the same question that had already been asked before, but Mark answered it differently each time. Dad, why did we build a house right here, by the lake? Mark looked up from the water, smiling slightly. When he was a boy, his father took him fishing here, and these places were etched in his memory as a symbol of peace and hope. Now Harry had the same memories, although in Mark's own life, there was a difficult period between childhood and this moment. He ran his hand through his son's hair and answered, looking straight into his surprised and inquisitive eyes. Because it was here that I once realized who I wanted to be. This place reminds me that there are simple but most important things in life. Family, love, the work you do with your own hands, and that feeling of freedom when you look at the water and see the mountains reflected. The boy listened seriously, although some of these words were not yet fully understood to him. But 6-year-old Harry already knew, if Dad says so, then it's not just a nice phrase. Mark Whitman was not a man who threw around words, he always put meaning into them. What did you want to be when you were little? Harry did not lag behind, twirling the wooden boat in his hands. You know, I wanted to be a craftsman, to build something real, Mark answered. I have always loved working with my hands. And also, he raised an eyebrow as if remembering, I dreamed that I would have a family. He looked at the lake, where the setting sun was drawing golden paths on the water. Events that seemed very distant came to mind, how he repaired the roof of Farmer Joe Hartford, how he returned home that day and realized that tension was growing in his relationship with Christine. And then her departure, the painful realization of betrayal, months of emptiness and silence. And finally, the meeting with Lauren, their days together, the first veranda, the first evening tea. He remembered how his heart began to gradually thaw. Harry noticed that his dad was a little lost in himself and touched him on the elbow. Are you probably thinking about something sad right now? Mark sighed, smiling with soft sadness. A little, son, but it's no longer sad, so, I remember. Sometimes we need to look back to see how much we have changed. I too had to go through big changes before I felt truly happy. Harry thought for a moment, trying to comprehend his father's phrase, then nodded, taking these words as something important that would become even clearer in the future. The pines above their heads rustled a little louder. A light gust of wind brought the subtle aroma of pine needles mixed with the dampness of the lake water. Lauren's muffled voice was heard from the side of the house, apparently calling them to dinner. Harry, hearing his mother's voice, turned his head, but did not move from his place yet. It was too nice and quiet here, next to his dad, on the shore of the lake. "Shall we go?" Mark suggested. "Mom has probably already warmed up our casserole." Lauren's voice was heard again in the distance, calling them both to the table. "Mark, Harry, dinner is on the table. Sadie is already hungry and doesn't want to start without you. Let's go," Mark shouted back, and then asked his son, "Well, are we moving?" Harry nodded and stood up, carefully placing his wooden boat on the edge of the bench. He probably wanted to throw it into the water one more time before leaving, but the wind was a little stronger, and the boy was afraid that the toy would be carried away. Maybe then, on the weekend, he and Dad will do a little launching again. They walked along the shore to the path leading to the house. The house stood on a hillock, built of strong log walls, with spacious windows in which the sunset began to be reflected. Through the large glass openings, part of the living room was visible, where Lauren was already waiting at the wooden table, and little Sadie, who had recently turned 9, was hovering next to her. The girl shook invisible crumbs off the table, arranging napkins so that everything looked like in a restaurant. When Mark and Harry entered the house, the aroma of baked potatoes and spices immediately hit their noses. Lauren smiled, pushing the dish towards her. "Well, our travelers have returned from the lake. Nice to see you. Sit down quickly. I was already thinking about running after you screaming that everything would cool down." Harry burst out laughing and washed his hands in the sink, and Mark walked up to his wife, leaned over, and kissed her on the cheek. "Thank you for reminding us we could have stayed there longer. The sun is so beautiful today." Sadie rolled her eyes, showing that she was not so interested in all this, but she was already waiting for dinner. The girl looked joyful and seemed to have eaten half of the green peas straight from the bowl. Lauren made a tentative remark to her, but then waved her hand. "Okay, so what? The main thing is that there is an appetite." Everyone gathered around the table, and the usual family conversations began. How was the day? What was new at school? Sadie attended elementary school in Riverford. How the neighbors were doing. Lauren talked about how a person with a rare allergy came to see her at the outpatient clinic, and even in the fall season, which is quite unusual. Harry recounted how he and his friend at school today made crafts from pine cones. Sadie boasted that their class had won a drawing contest and now had their artwork hung in the hallway outside. "And I'll have to go to Tom Henderson one of these days," Mark put in, finishing with the potatoes. "His tractor is malfunctioning again. There seems to be something wrong with the ignition. Let's figure it out." "Dad, you promised that we would fix the tractor together," Harry exclaimed, remembering how he liked to say that Lauren's grandfather left them an old tractor, and Mark was able to reanimate it. And now any car, any technique has become something of an adventure for Harry. "I promised, so I'll take you with me, of course," Mark smiled. "But you will have to follow all my instructions so as not to get oiled from head to toe." "I won't get dirty, I'm already big," said the boy with a proud look. Sadie giggled, waving her fork. "Look, Harry, one day Daddy himself will smear you." Don't complain about stains on your clothes later. The common good-natured laughter brought them even closer together. At such moments, Mark and Lauren did not need extra words to understand. This is the very family happiness that they created together. Yes, it is not the same as Mark once imagined the ideal life in his youth, but maybe it is even better, because it is real, suffered, and stood by time. When dinner came to an end, the children ran to play in the yard, although it was already getting dark. Lauren helped Mark clear the table, and then, carefully freezing, pressed herself against his shoulder. Today you look a little thoughtful. Nostalgia. Probably, he admitted. Harry and I were sitting by the water, and he asked me why I built the house here. I said that here I realized who I want to be, and I caught myself thinking, it all started with a dream, which didn't seem to come true the way I wanted at first. But in the end, I still found myself. Lauren ran her hand through his hair. That's how it happens, Mark. Sometimes we make a plan, but life takes us in a different direction. The main thing is that in the end, we come to where our home is. Mark smiled, responding to her affection. Yes, and I am grateful to fate that I found you. Thank you, Lauren, for not being afraid to reach out to me when I was broken, for not being afraid of provincial life. She just shook her head. Mark, I also went through a lot. I drove here, thinking only about my grandfather, my work as a paramedic, and my loneliness. And then I met you, a man who, wall by wall, board by board, restored both me and his life. We did it together. At that moment, Sadie appeared at the door, asking in a whisper with a mischievous smile, "What, hugs again without me? I want to." They laughed and called her over. The three of them hugged her. Sadie, clinging to her parents, closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing this family warmth, and then joyfully ran away, shouting, Harry, Harry, where are you? Let's show Mom and Dad how we can race." Hasty footsteps were heard in the yard. Lauren and Mark looked at each other, smiled, and decided to follow the children. The evening sky was becoming darker. The first stars were already breaking through the purple haze. The house glowed comfortably from the inside with the yellow light of the lamps. It seemed that nothing could shake this quiet clarity. However, approaching the porch, Mark stopped for a second and looked back at the lake, which he had recently left. A memory flashed across his gaze, as if he were seeing himself as a young man again, sitting next to his father and holding fishing tackle in his hands. Then he imagined himself, already an adult, who came here alone one autumn day when Christine had left, and knew only one thing, that it was necessary to build. And finally, he introduced himself as he is today. Husband, father of 2 children, owner of a house on the shore. All these versions of himself merged into one point. He felt that the past, whatever it was, should not be carried around as a burden. Love, a thing of the past, had once caused pain, but now he knew how to let it go with understanding and even gratitude for the experience. Christine had gone her own way a long time ago, and wherever she was now, perhaps in Riverford with her son Trevor, he wished her nothing but the best. He didn't feel angry or resentful. On the contrary, inside there was a feeling of peaceful farewell to everything that did not come true. Farewell to the past, he thought. Sometimes it's the best thing you can do to make room for the future. From the direction of the courtyard came Harry's exclamation. Dad, Sadie and I will throw the ball. It will fly into the bushes. Come on, hurry up. Otherwise it will get dark. Mark smiled, narrowing his eyes slightly, and took a step forward to where his children and wife were waiting for him, where the lights were on in the windows, where real life remained. The past was not oblivion, but lessons learned, lessons that he received and now honored. But you have to live in the present. He left his memories there, in the calm surface of the lake, and moved forward. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Mark lives and works in the small town of Riverford, where he does renovations and construction work, dreaming of building a house by a beautiful lake. He is known as a reliable craftsman, but his personal life is complicated by a tense relationship with his wife, Christine. a split in a relationship, and choosing a different path. Christine, tired of the monotonous and routine life in the provinces, dreams of a brighter and richer experience. She begins an affair with successful construction company owner Dylan, which leads to a breakup with Mark. As a result, Christine leaves, remains with her son Trevor, and her relationship with Dylan turns out to be cold and calculating. Left alone, Christine faces difficulties related to pregnancy and financial problems. A new meeting and the beginning of a new life for Mark. After the breakup, Mark, immersed in work, gradually finds support in the person of Lauren, an energetic and determined woman who came to help her sick grandfather. A warm friendship develops between them, developing into love. Together, they begin to build a new house by the lake, joining forces in renovating the barn, building housing, and running the family farm. New families and the path to harmony. Over time, Mark and Lauren have children, and their modest but sincere family life is embodied in joint work, mutual understanding, and support. At the same time, Christine remains in Riverford with her son Trevor, realizing the consequences of her choice. At the annual fair, the lives of two families intersect, and Mark realizes that the past is left behind, giving way to the present, where he has found love and peace. Thus, the story tells about the difficult path of personal losses and beginnings, about the choice between a comfortable routine and the search for new opportunities, and also about how life gives a second chance to those who are not afraid to build their own future.